What's going on, guys? It's Char here, back with another episode of Charred Takes. Now, it has been a while since I've sat down and done one of these. No reason in particular, but we're gonna get into a couple of channel updates, what's been going on with me recently. If you don't care about any of that stuff and you're just here for the topic, in the title and the thumbnail, go ahead and skip to this timestamp down below. So I wanted to talk really briefly about what's been going on with me, what's been going on with the channel, and whatnot. So as you guys know, at the end of last year, I was dealing with a bit of like a health condition without going, super far into it or deep into it. For the most part, all of those symptoms and things I was experiencing have cleared up, which is really good, and it's really great news. That's just a little bit of a life update, but let's talk about the channel. So as you may or may not have noticed, I feel like the amount of activity and kind of like maybe uploads sort of, a week or two back, I missed like a double upload. The stuff on the channel has been slowing down a little bit. There's a couple myriad of reasons. One of them is work has kind of kicked up a little bit. I've been helping out onboarding some new people on our team. But another reason is just like, I don't really feel like I'm in a rut. I just feel like I really love recording, editing, and doing everything around Marvel Rewind. It's kind of like this progression series is kind of like my baby in a way. It's like the series that has been going on since my channel began, basically. And I have a lot of fun just deck building, recording, playing, talking through the games. I love the interaction and all the people who leave comments on those videos. So if that is one of you guys, from me to you, I appreciate it so very much. But I always try and I try not to like overwork myself. I think 3 videos a week is very manageable and doable. But that being said, I'm struggling to find something else to kind of like go into, kind of like not to develop a niche, so to say, but something that's like reoccurring or something that I really have a ton of fun doing. So I do love sitting down and recording like the Charred Takes here, because it's kind of like I get to just discuss things at the top of my mind in kind of like a structured, formatted way. I have a lot of fun recording these, but I don't always have things to talk about when it comes regarding the game. So I'd like to open the floor up to you guys. If there's anything you'd want to see from me in specific, maybe something I'd done in the past, like mastering Ultron was one thing I did, which was talking about building against a villain and like gameplays associated with it and like how I go about doing that. Even from other things, I don't know, I've been getting into like kind of craft making as of recently. So I've made tokens for the game. You guys have seen those on the channels for like a couple months now. I've been making proxies, like custom heroes and then proxies for other games I've been playing. So if any of that guys sounds interesting to you, or you have any ideas on something you'd want to see from me, that should be a ton of fun. I will say in the near future, there should be a good mix of content. We're probably due for a hero reveal here in a bit. In addition to that, I'm going to the Con of Heroes, which is, I'm planning on making a larger video announcing that, just in case any of you guys are going, so we can get some games in there. You guys can meet me or whatnot. But yeah, I'm planning on making that a bigger thing to record, so it's not like the main focus of this video. But I think we'll have some content around like deck building, and maybe I'll find something that I really, enjoy and can build into like a niche, or maybe like a side series. This Charred Takes is a side series, but I don't really know how to enunciate it very well. But I'd like to reiterate that I'm not going anywhere. I love uploading and interacting with you guys and Marvel Rewind. Things have just kicked up a bit recently, which is why the content adversely has slowed down a tad. But let's go ahead and get into the Charred Take for today proper. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to title this video, or what kind of title I'll come up with to kind of entice people to listen and go along. As always, Charred Take is a discussion series. Feel free to throw me on a side monitor or in the background. It's almost like a visual podcast type of video, where it's not going to be a ton of visuals unless you want to see me enunciate and speak with my hands a bit, which is, always appreciated. But our topic for today, and kind of what I'm talking about, is Marvel Champions is one game, but it's also 4 different games. And what do I mean by that? And I'm going to go into an elaboration. I feel like 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, and 4 are all completely different, valid, and unique ways to play this game. But the Charred Take comes where I'm going to start it off before I get into my disclaimers, that I think multiplayer is better than playing solo in almost every single way imaginable. Before we get into this and the proper thesis, remember, the opinions here I'm expressing are completely my own, and I encourage all of you guys to share your opinions down in the comment section down below. Let me know if my take was cooking, or if it was charred, aka it was burnt in the oven for too long. That's always the crux of the series. Ton of fun, and let's get into it. So The reason why this kind of topic came about, it was kind of bouncing around in my head for a bit now. I feel like this is a sentiment that has been echoed by a lot of other creators in the space. And what's it called? But most games for me as well as all of those other creators, most of the time I play Marvel Champions outside of the channel. It's almost 100% multiplayer. I almost never play solo outside of the channel. And for me, I find the game is better and more fun. So getting to the thesis proper, although hero design nowadays is hewing more to like a jack of all trades, kind of like a solo design where a hero can do a little bit of everything, the game is best experienced in multiplayer, specifically 2 and 3 player. And I'm biased in that because those are my most played modes. I've never played a 4-player game, but I have played a ton of 1 player. I've played a ton of 2 player, and I've played a ton of 3. So let's go ahead and get into the episode proper. Let me explain myself, and you guys can leave your own thoughts down in the comment section down below. So we're going to start off, we're not going to talk about multiplayer first. We're going to talk about the pros of solo play, because this might seem really confusing coming from me when most of the gameplay on the channel is 1 player. So let's talk about kind of why that is, the pros of solo play, and we'll get into that right now. So one of the biggest pros of solo play is that you're able to crank out a lot of games. Like the game time from setup to playing the game to pick up to playing the game, reset, playing the game is really fast, really snappy, and really fun. And that was one of the main reasons I initially got hooked into the game, because I couldn't convince any of my friends or anyone else to play with me. You can just play solo. And so, yeah, cranking out games both in the setup time and play time are significantly shorter. You have less decisions to make. There's less villain cards, you're seeing less encounter cards, there's less threats on the board to manage, etc. I would say another pro of solo play is that there are new emergent strategies. Also, the certain strategies are buffed, I feel like, in solo, and I think Rush is a prime example of this. Aggression Rush is something that you can do in solo against, like, I think a large majority of the heroes, especially ones on standard, where you just use your health as a resource. You just ignore everything on the board. If something doesn't come in that immediately loses you the game, you just ignore it. Crisis Icon don't care. Side schemes don't care. Unless a minion comes in with guard, it doesn't matter. The only thing you're doing is hitting the villain in the face. Now, there's a couple scenarios this just 100% doesn't work on, like Magneto. You actually have to throw out his schemes to be able to defeat him. But I would say Rush in solo specifically is a strategy that's a lot stronger than in the other modes of playing. I think the final pro of solo play, specifically for a content creator perspective, is that it's kind of like with the less setup time, you can record it alone. So a large reason why a lot of the gameplay on the channel is solo is because you don't need to coordinate with another person. You can, set up, record on your own terms, on your own time. You can do as many takes as you want, stop a recording, come back later, do a recording. It's a lot less to set up and a lot less to worry about. I feel like 2-player, 3-player games are more fitting for like a live stream or something, or maybe a video where you don't really care about the outcome, because not everyone has, 2, 3, 4 hours to commit to sit down and recording, to record and find a win, especially for Marvel Rewind. I think I'm talking about specifically here. And yeah, it's just the gameplay, the setup, everything is so much shorter playing solo, which makes it really good, and why it's so, I think, represented in the YouTube community. Now, there are a lot of channels, or there's a couple channels who go and do 2-player, 3-player, 4-player, usually 2 players like two-handed, so it's still the same person playing like 2 people's decks. I just don't find that way of playing very fun. If I'm going to be playing alone, I'd rather just play solo. But I would say, like, I have so much more fun playing with someone else in multiplayer. That's all I really have to say about the pros of solo. If you guys have more, make sure to leave them down below. But we're going to get into the cons of solo, which are going to greatly outnumber the pros I just listed here. So one of the cons of solo, and adversely, these become the strengths of multiplayer, which you will see very shortly. First one is, I feel, the biggest and the most jarring for me. Half of the game is effectively shut off to most solo players in most, I would say, caveat this, expert scenarios. And what I mean by that is going alter ego, especially versus villains with steady and stalwart. Alter ego is the thing, I've said this multiple times, I think on other podcasts and other videos. Alter ego is the part of the game that made me fall in love with it. I love the idea of flipping down. Your hero is like two-sided. There's like multiple things you can do. You get access to different things, different cards, different supports. So fun. I love doing it. You get like a bigger hand size, but then you have to deal with something that isn't damage. You have to deal with the thwarting. It's such a good time. I love alter ego so much. Big reason why She-Hulk's one of my favorites. And when I was playing standard, like you can flip down, it doesn't really matter. You're almost never gonna lose off of one flip down. But as if you go into expert and then even like harder difficulties, let's say you want to play heroic, one flip down could like lose you the game from the main being at like 0 threat, and that just feels like really bad to play. It makes it to where like some people enjoy the play patterns of counting all the villain activations in the discard pile. I'm not saying this isn't something you have to worry about in multiplayer. There are certain scenarios where the villain has such a high scheme stat or has so many activations that it is something to worry about, but it's not like something you have to worry about in solo. Like if I'm flipping down against a villain in multiplayer and the threat's at 0 and my other teammate is staying up, there's a really low chance he's going to scheme out the main. But let's say I do that same one, but I flip down in solo and I get it to 0, they can do a big scheme. They can put one on for step 1 of the villain phase, they can have a big scheme into an advance, another scheme, and then you just instantly lose the game. There's like nothing you can do unless you're playing Justice and playing under surveillance. But that's a whole other discussion on like the solo patch cards. Should solo only be playable if you're playing Justice with under surveillance? I don't think so. There's 4, even 5 aspects now that you can play. You shouldn't have to feel shoehorned into playing that in order to actually flip down and take advantage of your hero, or lock in with Justice with a really big confuse build. If your hero doesn't have a built-in confuse, how do you get those flips safely? I do think it's a fun challenge to try and like a puzzle to figure out to do that in solo, but I think in multiplayer, it's almost like that part of the game is just removed. It's like as long as there's a bit of coordination between you and your teammate, or maybe you're playing two-handed, you can basically alternate the turns you flip down between both people. Everyone can take advantage of their alter ego supports if they want to, and it's just so much more fluid, and it feels like the way the game was meant to be played. The second con of solo I have is like half of the aspects feel shut off or not what they're supposed to represent. Maybe not what they're supposed to represent, but they feel shut off as in there's so much more these aspects can do that don't really get represented very well in solo. One of the prime examples, I feel like aggression outside of like rushing the villain in solo, not that it isn't strong, but it's like it feels so much more fleshed out in multiplayer. You have to have heroes patch up your shortcomings. So like a lot of the time when I'm playing, like let's say She-Hulk, for example, I have to be playing her in Justice or leadership in solo specifically because her thwarting is so low and her economy so bad. Both of those can kind of like make up for it, give her that time to flip down, flip up over and over, take advantage of her alter ego ability. And it's really hard to kind of justify playing her in something like a protection or aggression because it doesn't patch up her weaknesses. Adversely, in multiplayer, what you can do is that you can just ignore her weaknesses. You queue up with your friend who's playing a hero that's really good at thwarting or like can really give her some like economy buffs, and you can go all in into like protection or aggression and just do amplify her strengths, do what she's really good at, and you have that ability to because you don't need to be this jack of all trades build. I would say like another example is like protection in solo specifically is basically reserved to spamming readies. You have stuff like repurpose builds. You have like the what doesn't kill me and maybe like a ton of basic cards that ready you, especially on 14 HP heroes. It just doesn't feel like a really fleshed out aspect. Even though I do like that version of protection, I do like the ready builds. It's not the only thing protection can do. And then I was going to say Justice specifically feels really weird and weak in solo. It feels like you want to patch up the main with under surveillance, but everything else kind of feels like an afterthought because there isn't enough stuff to thwart in solo a lot of the time. As long as you're doing basic maintenance on the main and then maybe you get a side scheme every now and then or you flip Shadow of the Past, there's not a lot to thwart. There's really no point to play a ton of thwart events because as long as you're thwarting for 1 or 2 off the main every turn, there's really no like big reason unless it's also a scenario with a ton of side schemes, in which case running thwarting events would make sense. It just feels like something that you play to patch up the main and then give you confuses so you can flip down. It's almost like you're not really doing anything kind of interesting with the aspect. The third one I have here is that the reason why I find this a con of solo, it's the high variance and inconsistent villain experience. So it's twofold on this one where there's so much less encounter and boost cards you see in a solo game rather than a multiplayer game. that you're gonna have really inconsistent, high variance, lopsided villain experience. So what I mean by this is that some games you will flip through a villain and you'll be fighting a tough villain, and the only cards they flip are the standard encounter set. For the most part, the standard encounter set cards are not that bad. You have like an extra attack activation. Gang Up can be kind of nasty. Shadow of the Past is nasty, but then you have like Caught Off Guard and like for the most part, they aren't horrible cards to flip. Or sometimes you just get the weaker part of their encounter set. Maybe it's just like 2-threat side schemes in solo specifically. Or it's like Thanos has one that's like give him a tough status card. Like these cards don't mean anything. Like they really don't, they don't present a huge challenge for you to take care of on your turn. So I would say like a lot of your solo game experiences are really hinged on if they get this really big tempo card or they start like a surge train really early in the game. I can kind of feel like it's impossible to come back from. I would see that the early game feel and tempo is decided by a few key nasty encounter cards in the deck, which you can sometimes just avoid by playing a villain enough time. Like if I sat down, and I think this is something that helped me get my first expert Ronin win, because he is just a brutal villain where so many attempts, it was just the one attempt where he didn't hit this nasty kind of like a variety of encounter cards against me in those first couple of turns that allowed me to get that win. And you can just pick up and play those games over and over until you really avoid those nasty cards. And then the game just kind of feels easy in comparison. Now for Ronin, I don't know if any Ronin game ever feels easy truly, but the experience of playing a villain without hitting any of the expert set cards or the really nasty cards versus one that's hitting the really easy cards is like night and day. And I feel like it can lead to people getting lopsided kind of villain experiences, kind of lopsided, ideas about the villain strength or the hero that they're playing strength and whatnot. And I feel like all of this kind of does go down a little bit in multiplayer, which, we'll get into here in a bit for multiplayer pros. So I'm going to kind of get ahead of the curve here, and I kind of forgot that this was later in the script as well, but I'm sure there's going to be people echoing in the comments is, if multiplayer is so good, why don't more people play and upload it? And again, this is something I touched on earlier, but I think one of them, the main one, like I said, is the logistics. It is so much easier to not have to coordinate a game session with somebody else than it is to sit down at a table with the villain, with a deck, and just record it yourself. Also, another key reason why everything is so solo focused, I feel like it's so much easier to discuss the game when you're talking about the parameters of being one singular hero versus one singular villain. When you're talking about someone's matchup, you're like She-Hulk into, I don't know, Magneto. It's really easy to kind of like lower down that, matchup into like, well, She-Hulk can really struggle with, She-Hulk really struggles with thwarting, so it can be hard with her to deal with Magneto's early threats on the main. So you kind of have to patch up that thwarting doing this or this. And then it's like also, there's so many other factors that'll tie into it where you try and evaluate it in multiplayer. You're like, okay, well, She-Hulk, as long as she's paired with someone who patches up her weakness, is actually really good into Magneto's scenario because she has really good answers to, like the Asteroid M Sentinel, and then she has really good answers to this specific card. And like, because she doesn't have to worry about that one kind of Achilles heel of her thwarting, how she does in that scenario is actually a lot better than she would in solo because you just have somebody that patches up that weakness. And she might have like really key strengths that are really good in the Magneto scenario. This is just an example. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but that is definitely one thing to consider. And then also, I would say power and rankings are skewed to solo because it's, like I said, it is so much easier to discuss and consider. It's so much easier to see like, wow, Captain Marvel has a ton of economy. She can pay for a ton of allies. She's super good in solo because she can basically take out every single villain she wants to, versus like a Hulk in solo, which is like, wow, he does a lot of damage and that's basically it. But so many of these hero scenarios ask you to be this kind of jack of all trades, deal with so many threats on the board that it's not really super applicable in terms of the same rating isn't really super applicable when you're talking about these like kind of villain ratings, hero rankings and whatnot. It's just Solo is so much easier to record, so much easier to talk about and discuss. And I feel like, I fall into that as well. I like to play solo. It's just not my preferred way of playing the game. And if there was an easy way where I could have, like, I don't know, like a clone of myself or like my friend here at all times that had no other obligation and is like, yeah, let's sit down and record a multiplayer game, that would be 100% is what I would do on the channel every time. Obviously, it's not super realistic by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, so now that we discussed kind of the hitting the caveats of, well, why don't you play multiplayer on the channel, and as why we've talked about the cons of solo, let's talk about how these cons of solo are actually all of the strengths of multiplayer. Let's starting with alter ego, which again I've reiterated multiple times is my favorite part of this game. Again, I probably touched on this a little bit, so it's going to be a bit of repeating myself here, but with some basic planning in terms of what heroes you're going into scenario with, kind of the aspects you pick between you and the other person or people you're playing with, you can flip down or stay in alter ego for more than one turn at a time in multiplayer games. As long as you are like significantly contributing, let's say like you're a leadership deck and you're putting allies on the board that are making up for kind of like the thwarting you're putting on the main, or you have other ways to support the table on alter ego. There's, I think Maria Hill is the biggest one that comes to mind. You can just stay in alter ego in multiplayer. The threat threshold, because of how threat scales in multiplayer specifically, it scales so high and so quickly. The numbers, the thresholds as well as the threat number. There's so many more players who take care of this threat to make sure you can take advantage of all the building you need to do. That's why building in multiplayer specifically is so much faster and stronger, because these heroes like an Iron Man or an Ironheart or a Maria Hill, they don't have to flip up until the second, maybe even third time around, depending on the scenario you're playing, to be able to build. And by the time they flip up, they almost never have to flip back down. That little babying at the beginning of the game makes up with their output later in the game and lets people kind of recuperate, flip down themselves, take advantage of their alter egos and whatnot. And it just really opens up a big portion of the game for a lot of heroes in this game. You're able to utilize all your alter ego effects. You're able to utilize your flip effects. And it's just really, really a ton of fun. And also there's a lot of new and unique ways to cheat going into alter ego, with kind of that new protection card that I think was showed off, I think, in the Silk Hero pack. We also have stuff from identity-specific kits like Body Slide from Cable, which Body Slide in solo is a good card. Body Slide in multiplayer is absolutely insane and a ton of fun. So also you just get so many more combos to kind of cheat into alter ego without actually having to stay there. It's just such a good time. Moving on to the aspect diversity / identity. Now this one's gonna have a bit about it. So aggression, I think, blossoms into an amazing aspect in multiplayer. It's not just rushing the villain down. It's not just hitting the villain in the face for damage. Of course, it is still that at its core of its identity, but there's so much more you can do. You can do like minion summoning. You can do like get over here and then like draw off, bring it. You can do stuff like minion slaying, getting counters on Hall of Heroes. Maybe you want to go an ally build, then you want to like share buffs with the leadership player. So like you'll throw a boot camp on them so all of their allies get +1 attack. Throw a boot camp on yourself. You want to do something like hone technique, dive bomb, some really like ignorant strategies that don't really care what villain you're fighting, but it keeps the board in control. Like you have this really active, important role at the table. That's just so much more fun, I feel like, than just hitting the villain in the face. And I think it just really comes into its own as you kind of protect the table in a way, because all the leadership player or the protection player doesn't really want to deal with the minions they're up against. Like you're dealing with all this extra chip damage that would be going on the board, and just it's just so much fun to play things like that. And the calling an action, because all of their stuff are like hero actions or events, so you can like sequence how you play your turns out. So much fun, so cool. I would say justice has also a lot more to do with thwarting events. And it feels like something to manage and plan rather than simply keeping in check. What do I mean by this? In solo, a lot of justice and a lot of what you want to do on the main is just keep it in check. So you want to keep it as low as possible because you don't want to lose off a random advance. But because the threat ticks up so slowly in solo, and because you're more incentivized to stay hero side for longer. There's almost never really a need for big bursts of thwarting or like really heavy thwarting events. That is completely different when it comes to multiplayer. Threat scales so much in multiplayer. When you look at those side teams, 3 per player turns into 6 and 2 player, turns into 9 and 3 player, and 12 and 4 player. It is something you do have to think about, plan, and manage. It can't be an afterthought. If you're going into a scenario where there's a significant amount of side schemes, you need to throw in the odds. You need to throw in the overwatch. You need to have a plan to keep that threat in check, and it feels like a really active part in the game rather than something that's passive that you forget about and you do because, oh, you have to because I'm going to lose off a random advance. It's like, no, this isn't a passive part of the game. I need to plan my role as the Justice player. This thwart is something that needs to be managed, and it's just as important as managing the minions on the board, just as important as managing the amount of damage we're doing to the villain. I am keeping, the board in check from just going out of control into nonsense. And it's so fun. It's definitely a lot of fun. I love playing Justice. I love doing like support type plays, aspects, and heroes in multiplayer because it's just really fun and really rewarding. There's other things that you can also do is like really cool things like throwing float like a butterfly. Like float like a butterfly in solo is fun as long as you're not flipping down and your hero has like good amount of attack events. You can do a lot of damage with that confused status. Float like the butterfly in multiplayer, you can play that on someone else on the table. Unless I'm mistaken, you can play that under like your aggression player, and now whenever there's a confused status on the villain, their damage is bumped up a ton, especially if it's like a hero that maybe readies, if you're talking like a Quicksilver or something in the line of that has a ton of readies to ready up over and over. That one extra damage is just ticking up into 1, 2, 3. Like it's so much fun. There's so much you can do. Protection, moving on to another one, you just get a wider variety of plays. I feel like the protection pool really opens up when you go into multiplayer. You have access to a lot of like these healing cards that can kind of help your allies if you don't need to flip down, or like help them so they don't need to flip down to actually heal in their alter ego. You can do stuff like defending for the table. I think there's some really interesting kind of like heroes that can kind of like the Nightcrawler or the Iceman that can really lean into this defending for the table, or like readying up after you defend to defend for someone else. This is another way to kind of threat mitigate in a way because they don't have to flip down. The villain is never scheming. You're doing this job of taking all this damage for them so they can use their health, be maybe a bit more ignorant in how they play, stay up, and just do what they need to do without having to worry about their health. It's like all of these aspects are planned around so seamlessly to kind of work in this multiplayer scenario. It's so hard to kind of get this lopsided experience when you're playing in solo, even though I love solo and it's not like a scathing kind of diss video for it, even though it might come across that way. I just feel like the game just blossoms and expands in a really fun and cool way once you get a couple more players down at the table. So we're going to talk about high variance here as well. So when you play a villain in multiplayer, I feel like the variance in terms of the games you play, or kind of like the difficulty of villains, shoots way down. Because of the fact that the game isn't over in a couple turns and you only see like a fourth or like a half of the encounter deck, multiplayer games, especially when you go up to like 4 players, you will see basically every single card in that encounter deck, maybe in one game, but almost certainly, after 2 games, you're probably seeing every single encounter card. You're seeing or getting hit by most boost effects. You're going to know how this villain plays. You're going to know the key cards to watch out for, and you're going to know that these cards are probably have a high likelihood of coming up. It's not something that you can rely on, just dodging multiple games in a row and like getting a really skewed example of kind of like the villain's difficulty. You will run into the things that make the villain difficult, and you will need to actually plan and have like, good lines of play to kind of counteract these things. You have multiple people on the table, so it's easier to deal with these kind of like really big strengths, but also you just get a kind of a more, well-rounded opinion on how difficult this villain actually is. I would say, one of the points, I'm just reading off some of the points I put here. It says you will get a better feel for the scenario and have more consistent kind of difficulty level games. Since you'll see so many more encounter cards, the games where you manage to dodge the bad cards are much less likely, and just creates this consistent play experience. So I've basically covered why all the cons of solo are pros of multiplayer, but let's talk about one of the cons of multiplayer, and let's see how I can spin this into a way that I find it not so much of a con. one of the cons of multiplayer specifically is one that most people talk about. It's the setup and play time. But here's how I kind of view this to make it kind of a pro as well. It is true, setting up a multiplayer game and setting up a, you know, and sitting down to actually play a multiplayer game is definitely an experience and something you have to plan around. It is not something you can do like really quickly for like 20-30 minutes. It is definitely a time commitment, and it only scales further as you get more people on the table. But that being said, hello. That being said, the reason why I find this a pro is because you can enjoy the experience of sitting down at a table, having a really great conversation, and sitting down on the table, having a really great conversation, and deck building together, enjoying each other's presence, really thinking about talking through the villain and kind of what you guys want to accomplish in that game, whether you're playing standard, whether you're playing expert. And then also another big factor is how much fun you'll have from turn to turn, game to game, enjoying the turn-to-turn decision making with each other, kind of like reveling in having really great turns, or like feeling bad that you have like terrible hands. It's like, wow, maybe I should have revisited deck building a little bit. You can make really fun hero combos before you even get into the game. You can play like team up cards. It's just so much fun. And even though you have that slight con of how much it takes to set up, the deck building time, the play time, I feel like the moment to moment in the game, deck building outside the game, just talking to each other is so much worth that time investment. To end this video, I don't really know what I want to say. A lot of this was just expressing my opinion and love for Marvel Champions. I love playing solo, but I think playing multiplayer is so much fun. And if you're a solo only player, I behoove you to try it. If you have to hop on like a webcam and play with someone across the world on like a Discord, maybe hop on Tabletop Simulator, I'm telling you, you'll have such a fun time, and it'll be like, wow, I wish I could play it this way all the time. It's kind of how I feel. 2-player, 3-player games is kind of my sweet spot, but the con is definitely going to have me do a ton of 4-player games, so maybe my opinion will drastically change. I feel like I'm not going to enjoy 4-player as much as 2 and 3, but we'll see how that goes. I would say, to reiterate my thesis, although hero design is skewing towards more of a jack of all trades or solo focused experience, the game is best experienced currently and will always be best experienced in multiplayer. There's so much more things you get to add to the experience, so much more fun experiences, combos, aspect versatility, and whatnot that get added. Also, I'm talking specifically 2 to 3 player for me at least. But yes, this game is awesome. It's 4 games in 1, but I think the best versions are that 2 and 3 player. But of course, this is just my take, maybe even a charred take, depending on if you're a hardcore, diehard solo player or not. But as always, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Leave a like if you haven't already, comment if you haven't, and kind of share this around, see if anyone agrees, disagrees, if you think I'm, completely off my rocker here, or you really agree with me. I'm really curious to see what you guys think down in the comment section down below. That's going to be all for me right now. This has been Char. Take care of yourselves. Have yourselves a good one. Take it easy. Goodbye.